Welcome back to Advancing with Amy, Mental Health Warrior and Neurospicy Mama, the show where we dive into all things mental health and personal growth and neurodiversity to help you become the best version of yourself. I'm your host, Amy, and today we have a truly special guest who's joined us before, the amazing Dr. Cindy Hoard. She's a brilliant psychologist, a fearless mental health advocate, and the author of the incredible book, Spirit Rising, My Winding, Tumultuous Odyssey with Depression. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one, so grab a cup of your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's get started. All right, we're here today with Dr. Cindy Hoard on Advancing with Amy. Welcome, Dr. Cindy.
Welcome.
Glad
Happy
to
to be
have
here.
you here. So you wrote an amazing book that I finished reading a couple months ago, and I've been excited to talk to you about it. Can you tell me a little bit about what got you into writing this book in the first place?
Well, this book was it was being created before I even realized it. I've journaled a lot for over 40 years, and I have a long history of treatment-resistant depression, going through many various treatments and many journeys. The title of my book, Spirit Rising, My Winding Tumultuous Odyssey with Depression, takes and blends the some information about my actual journey, but also documents the changes and growth in my own spiritual life as I moved through the depression. Because I felt like there were things that happened during the depression that had an impact on my spiritual life as I was, going through it all. And I also really wanted to get word out there to people about the importance of acknowledging mental health, the need to be more aware of and sensitive to mental health, professionals to listen more to people about their mental health. And I could probably come up with a bunch more things, but I felt it was an opportunity not only to share my story, maybe help educate people a little bit about some of the aspects.
Do you find that when you were going through the reaching out to get help that you were facing stigma?
I think I was actually pretty lucky. My family at first was kind of like, "Oh, come on, Cindy, just, you know, be more positive," kind of situation. Although it was interesting because when I was 10 years old, the school counselor actually approached my mother and expressed concerns. And at first, my mom kind of couldn't figure it out and didn't leave it. But my family was ultimately extremely supportive and helpful, which I was very, very grateful for. And I personally reached out as I hit late adolescence, early adulthood. I sought mental health services on my own, which was a help. I mean, it was, but I never felt rejected. I never felt like people didn't take me seriously. It was hard to say what was going on, but I also knew inside that I needed some help.
I find that interesting that you felt it was hard to say what was going on because your book was so in depth and in detail and eloquent about what you were going through. And I thought I journal and I have never journaled like you journaled. It's beautiful. So
Thing.
yeah, I was definitely just taken back by that and how much time that must have taken. Did that take a lot of time or did it just flow right out of you?
The writing or
Yeah.
the No, well, the writing flowed and the writing took on many different faces. I mean, there are times where it's accompanied by a drawing or talking about an experience or whatever. And I think that there's just the life experience as you go through the life journey or your life journey, you learn more, you understand more. You can put names on things that you didn't have words for, which I think is tricky. And I just got to the point where I wanted other people to be educated because I wanted them to be aware not only for themselves and their families, but of people around them. I just finished writing a blog post on what is mental illness and just reminding me even that, it's not just some weird thing. Does have a physiological basis. And there are lots of things that can be done to support people through the process of healing.
What do you say to other people that are going through similar situations and it's treatment resistant like you have? What do you recommend for them?
I think it's individual for each person. And I think that there are lots of different approaches to therapy out there. Not every approach is good for every person. There was one approach that was, as a psychologist, and as I was working on my doctorate, I learned about something called cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's about trying to figure out what your thoughts are and how your thoughts maybe are getting in your way. Well, in my case, I turned that in on myself. So it was like, why can't I just stop feeling this way? Why can't just stop having these thoughts? And that was of no help to me because what I needed to do was I needed to just kind of let go of it and just kind of move on step by step without an expectation that there was a switch that somebody was going to be able to flip that was going to make everything better.
That makes sense. Just letting go and realizing that this is something that you have in your life and you've just got to deal with that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And in the book, you mentioned the dark night of the soul. Could you talk a little bit about what exactly that is and how you went through that?
Sure. There are lots of different definitions of the dark night of the soul. The notion of the dark night of the soul originally came from the Catholic tradition and the experience of Saint John of the Cross, who was a priest and who went through an experience where he was basically placed kind of in the basement of a place, it's kind of a dungeon, and really didn't have access to outdoor light, wasn't able to get out and exercise or much. And he became very, very despondent. And just more and more he felt like there's nothing here. Why is this happening to me? And for him, he had an epiphany. And it was only when he hit kind of that bottom of that despair that he experienced a reconnection with God very profoundly. And he's written about it a lot. And since that time, the dark night of the soul has been talked about in lots of different ways, in lots of different categories. There certainly is the religious dark night of the soul, but there's also in our kind of new age spirituality piece, people are also talking about the dark night of the soul. And, you know, the thing is that when you're in the middle of an experience of the dark night of the soul, it's like you just want to throw everything away and, be done with it. There's kind of you lose hope. But the wonderful thing about it is if you can face that depth of despair, you can end up having revelation is perhaps a little bit strong, but there can be something really wonderful that you learn about yourself, that you learn about life, that you learn about your relationship with your higher power, whatever that is for you. And I feel like, there's all of the different kinds of emotions that go with it, but then there's also kind of that self examination. Um, and the issue of, okay, what is a soul? What is my soul? What do I believe? I went through periods of time where I felt I was disconnected from God because there was just such emptiness within me. And yet as I would continue to move through that, I would have insights. And sometimes I think it
I'm so
takes
sorry.
stepping back and meditating and contemplating and reflecting to be aware of what's really going on in our own development.
So I find it interesting. You kind of mentioned what I was going to bring up was that it's kind of like when you're in the dark night of the soul, you're yearning for answers and looking for answers. Is that how you find the spiritual peace?
I would say yes and no. And the reason I say that is and even in the literature, it's like there's no one description of how you move through a dark night of the soul. And to me, it's more looking at what may have triggered you to be in that space, but then also that continued internal reflection, contemplation, and self-examination of what do I believe? What am I looking for? And sometimes it means letting go of, some kind of image or idea that you've created in your own mind about how life should be better or life should be all wonderful or whatever. But then also realizing that there's the downside too. And what I can say is that, well, feeling unfortunate at the time, I've had the opportunity to move through several different episodes of The Dark Knight. And I always feel elevated, lifted up. I always end up, feeling like I have an aha about something that it's like, what the heck's the matter with you that you didn't figure that out before? But I also have discovered that's unless you make that time to step back, to reflect, to contemplate, you may not even be able to experience that part.
Not to belabor this, but this is just fascinating to me. So, how does this relate to like someone who maybe is going through a suicidal period of their life? Is that a dark night of the soul?
It could be. It definitely could be. And part of what happened is going to happen in that situation is one, what kind of external supports are there? But two, what's the internal strength? And what's the desire of the person to maybe stick it out a little bit, deal with that time of discomfort? Obviously, not to the point that they commit suicide. But I think someone who's suicidal is certainly at that very, very deep place of feeling lost and feeling disconnected from God.
Okay, thank you. So, tell me a little bit about what you do now to make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Well, I believe there's a lot of things that we have to do to take care of ourselves. And I would say the number one thing that I see happening with myself and with many others is actually setting time aside for self care. And that self care could be going for a massage, it could be going on a hike, it could be reading something, it could be going for a drive, it could be engaging in a craft or a hobby that someone really likes. So those things that are going to nurture us personally and aren't designed for anyone but us. And I think that one of the things that I know I talk about in the book is that it's really important to understand that self care isn't being selfish. Self care is about filling up our own tank and making ourselves a priority. Because if we don't take care of ourselves and continue to build our strength, whether that's emotional or spiritual or physical, we're not going to be able to do many of the things that we think we would like to do.
Right. I think in this day and age, it's kind of a double edged sword. In one aspect, there are more ways to reach out and get help. But in another aspect, there is so much going on that people are getting lost in the working too much or not taking care of themselves and delving deep into other aspects of their life that are just burying them deeper.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did you finally get to a place where you felt, I don't want to say normal, but steady and you know what I mean?
Mhm. Well, it has been a journey, and the thing is that it's been a process for me, and it's taken lots of things to get me to the point where I would say I am today. uh, from my own reflection and spiritual development and spiritual exploration. As far as depression goes, I have been treated with medications, and to this day, I'm on medication as a maintenance kind of thing. I had a deep brain stimulator implanted to treat depression about 15 years ago, which was quite an experience, but has definitely made a difference. And I feel like my own spiritual life and evolution have also moved me to a very different place of feeling good about myself of seeing my own gifts and being more hopeful about things, seeing that there's possibilities out there.
Right. And I know with my own depression, I have learned that I'm gonna come out of it. So there's more hope even when I'm in those dark times. So I think part of it is aging and living through all these experiences over again. And then you realize that, oh, this is not going to last forever.
Although when you're in the middle of it sometimes, it's like there's no end in sight.
Yes.
But you're right, that experience in life of having, been through the ups and downs, and I think one of the things that people don't realize, if you don't have some experiences of ups and downs, you don't have a way to know, kind of which part of the cycle you're in, and know that for all of us, that for everyone there are ways in which life is going to be up and down. But if you don't have the up and down, you don't have a way to have a sense of, gee, am I up or down?
That makes me think because I know, I have bipolar disorder and you have treatment resistant depression. How do you differentiate between the two? Like, how do you know something is not recurrent depression and it actually is bipolar?
Well, I think that we are doing a better job of defining it and looking at the characteristics across the board. There was deliberation. There was actually one doctor who put bipolar down as a diagnosis for me, but nobody else, none of the other professionals agreed with that person. And I feel that the therapist that I worked with for so many, many years, who was actually a psychiatric nurse practitioner, documented. And so the treatment resistant depression diagnosis came from a combination of things, looking at different types of drugs that were used to treat the depression, looking at different types of strategies that I'd employed, looking at patterns in terms of I didn't have any of the kind of manicky kinds of things that are often talked about. And so I think it comes down to having a practitioner who is really a good sleuth and able to really get to know you in such a way that they can sort that out and gain insight to where you're at. I mean, I've always said that diagnosis is an art, it's not a science, because there are so many different factors. There's all kinds of physical disorders that can be part of what's going on with mental illness. And that was certainly true for me. And so it was this, you kind of had to weigh and think, okay, is it more this or is it more that? Or are we missing something? Is there something going on that we haven't found? Certainly medications can have a huge effect. Medications have so many different types of side effects. And that's something we have to always be aware of. So I do think it's an art and not just a science to making an accurate diagnosis. And another part of that is what kind of a relationship the patient has with the practitioner. Because as a patient, at least for myself, I had to get to a point where I felt safe enough with somebody that I could let down some of my defenses and the curtains I was hiding behind, that then allowed that person to understand me even better. So, it it's complex, and I'm not trying to make it sound like it can't happen, but I think part of that also is what you can do for your own self-advocacy and what you can do to express what fits and what doesn't fit. Because certainly there were times when something was proposed as something to look into, and, my immediate reaction almost was, "I don't think so." I was never traumatized, I was never abused, none of any of those things. So, I came from a very loving family. So, part of it's just the process of trying to sort out what's going on.
And I hear you kind of saying that you have to advocate for yourself and trust your gut.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your book?
buy it.
I did.
It's it's available on Amazon, and that's been a whole journey in and of itself. It was like I felt like writing the book was almost the easy part, when it came out, up against the whole world of marketing, which is something I was totally unfamiliar with. And that's been I feel like I've almost been trying to learn another whole profession in that process, which can be very time consuming. Um, but what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to get out there on podcasts. I'm looking for opportunities to speak in communities. I've made contact with the state NAMI association and maybe doing some meetings for them and that kind of thing. So the continued advocacy is that's just deep in my gut, and that will never go away from me.
I think that's wonderful, and I think you have such a good story to kind of give people some hope, and so it's great that you're willing to share that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Where can people find you?
My website is drcindyauthor.com, and that is my primary website. I'm also at that same name on Substack, where I write weekly blogs and daily notes. Mostly right now, I'm writing about mindfulness. And so those are free things that anybody can access.
Okay, great. And so on how do you get on Substack? Do you just go to substack.com
Go to substack.com.
and search
It's
for Dr. Cindy?
just type in Dr. Cindy Author.
Okay, great. Well, I will make sure I put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on today, Dr. Cindy.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Amy.
And there you have it, folks. An insightful and inspiring conversation with Dr. Cindy Hoard. We delve deep into her journey through treatment-resistant depression, the transformative power of journaling, and the profound impact of the dark night of the soul. Dr. Cindy emphasized the importance of self-care and the complex art of finding the right treatment. I want to thank Dr. Cindy for sharing her wisdom and experience with us today. Her story is a beacon of hope for anyone struggling with mental health challenges. Don't forget to check out her book, Spirit Rising, My Winding Tumultuous Odyssey with Depression. It's available on Amazon. You can find the links in the show notes. For more insights and to connect with Dr. Cindy, visit her website at drcindyauthor.com and explore her blog on Substack by searching for Dr. Cindy Hoard. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with your friends, family, and anyone who might benefit. Together, we can break the stigma around mental health and promote understanding and support. Thank you for listening to Advancing with Amy, Mental Health Warrior and Neurospicy Mama. Until next time, stay proactive, take care of your mental health, and keep advancing, warriors.